safe to run a 3D printer overnight? Let's talk about it. Legally, it feels like the answer I have to give is proceed at your own risk. And I have to imagine that if you read through all the manuals and warning guides on your 3D printer, it probably says somewhere in there to avoid using it while it's unsupervised. With that being said, I do quite frequently run my 3D printer overnight, and I know hundreds, if not thousands of people with 3D printers, and I know quite a few of them run their 3D printers overnight. But at least for me, these are some precautions I like to use in doing so. First off is watching the first couple of layers go down. A lot of times if your print is going to have a major problem overnight, it's because that first layer was not solid. So I won't go to bed until I see at least one layer go down, but ideally 2 or 3 is even better. Obviously, this goes for any time you're running your 3D printer, but particularly if you're going to be running it overnight, try and clear away any junk that is surrounding the area, particularly around the wiring, or anything that could potentially get stuck in the way of your bed as it moves up and down. Here in Arizona, houses are required to have sprinkler systems, which does give me a little extra peace of mind, but if you don't have that, they additionally sell these fire suppressant balls, which are kind of cool. You can mount them over your 3D printers, and if a fire does start, this actually explodes and in theory should be able to suppress some of the fire, at least until you're able to get to the situation. Again, out of all the people I know who run multiple 3D printers constantly, I've only ever had one person have a report of this. That being said, it was a modified printer, and that goes into my next rule for myself, which is that once I start modifying a 3D printer, I will no longer let that printer run overnight. For example, my first Ender 3V2, it has more work done on it than a Kardashian, and honestly, I wouldn't even like to run that thing while I am watching it. Not to say a printer couldn't have an issue right from the manufacturer, as we saw with the A1s when they first came out, but with that said, a modified printer probably has a much higher likelihood of having an issue than an unmodified printer. As a precaution, when I first get a new printer for the first couple of weeks of letting it run, I don't let it run unsupervised while I am either asleep or out of the house. The more I run a printer, the more comfortable I get with it, but particularly if it's a printer that you have to assemble yourself out of the box, it's really good to just have a few runs where you're present and can troubleshoot any issues that arise. Finally, if you are going to be running your printers overnight or unsupervised, be sure to be keeping up on all of your maintenance, as any issues that go wrong on a maintenance standpoint could be something that ultimately leads to a problem. When I first started running my printers overnight, I would set alarms for the middle of the night to wake up and go check on them. It was a super stressful process, but as somebody who has been printing for years now, it is something I've become pretty comfortable with. That being said, everybody will have their own risk tolerance for these machines, so just understand your specific machine and understand what you need to do to keep it running smoothly.